Sure, sure.
Oh, perfect. All right. Well, if you're ready to begin,
Uh-huh.
yeah, perfect. If you could just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are.
My name's John Patrick Lowry. I studied music in school, composition. I was a composer and a fusion guitarist for a while. I was always into acting when I was a kid too. In school, I was in various productions, but chose music as my first career. And then I got a gig playing in a pit orchestra for a European tour of a Broadway show. And that's where I met Ellen McLean, my wife of 38 years now. I met her in Arnhem in the Netherlands. She was in the cast and I was in the orchestra. And things were going on in my private life that made I had formed a band, the Keith Lowry Duet, and we were doing well, but things were happening, and I decided to make a change. And when I met Ellen, she was talking about acting, and that was the first time that I'd really been around professional actors, is when I was on this tour in Europe, and I had no idea that you could just be a working actor making enough to make rent and not be you know some Hollywood megastar or something like that. Um, but when we got back to the States, when the tour was over, um, I went back and finished my master's degree in composition and started my doctorate, but I wasn't sure what we were going to do. We were in New York for a while. We decided to move out to Seattle because it was a place that I'd never been to, and someplace I'd wanted to see because I grew up in Colorado and loved being around mountains and stuff like that. And so I thought, well, go out to Seattle and see what the Cascades are like. And we knew that there was a big culture scene out here. And when we got out here, we started getting work as actors out here right away. And since I was doing that kind of thing, it made sense for me to get an agent out here. For those of you out there in the whatever a sphere, uh, there's only one city in the States where it really makes sense to have a theatrical agent, and that's New York. I mean, if you live in New York, then it makes sense to have an agent to get into theater, shows, Broadway shows, stuff like that. But everywhere else, there's just not enough work to keep agents busy. But for commercial work, for on-camera work, for voiceover work, it does make sense to have an agent. So I got an agent when I was first out here and started doing various Kentucky Fried Chicken commercials and Microsoft videos for, stuff like that. And then what about 94, I guess, I got my first audition for a video game voice job, which was probably either Spy Fox or Betrayal at Antaro, one of those two. I forget which came first, but I had gotten my first computer. That was a funny story. It was like, my wife Ellen has always been very, very supportive. I mean, she's just a wonderful person in so many ways. But I wanted to put together a MIDI studio because I was still actively composing at the time. And computers were really expensive at that time. But my first computer, and she said, "Okay, buy good." And so I borrowed from my life insurance and paid like, $3,400 for a used crammed Mac, a little Mac with a little 7-inch screen. It was just crammed. The guy had, upped it up, filled every slot and stuff like that. It had 106 mega drive or megabyte hard drive, 106 megabyte, or no, 160 megabytes. it had 8 megabytes of RAM, eight, count them, all 8 megabytes of RAM for $3,400. And I was going crazy. I'd never spent that much money on anything in my life. And then the very next day, I got a national commercial for John Deere tractor engines, and that paid me $3,500, and like it paid off the computer. And so from that point on, I thought, okay, well, the material plane is just utterly arbitrary and capricious and weird, and I'm not going to worry about it. But like I said, but I had my computer and I had heard about the game Myst, and I'm sure you were probably familiar with the game Myst, a very early computer game with first one that really had beautiful graphics and music and all that kind of stuff. and I loved it. I had always been fascinated by animation, loved animation when I was a kid, loved just the idea, particularly like full Disney animation where there was, beautiful scenery and flowers and butterflies flying around, all this kind of stuff. And just the idea that I was looking at something that looked like reality that had actually all been created. The one thing you couldn't do with a Disney movie was walk into it and walk around. And in the Mist game, you could. You could open doors, you could decide to go this way, you could decide to go that way. And that was the bee's knees for me. I love that. So when I got my first, and I think my first, I can't even remember it, either Spy Fox or Betrayal at Antara, I thought, oh, okay, cool. Well, I'm gonna be a part of this. Um, uh, and so I started doing that work. We were all, Ellen and I were very active in the local theater scene in Seattle, which throughout, I mean, from the 80s through the 90s and really up through right to the pandemic was this really, really vibrant theater scene that could probably keep 50 actors employed full time without having to do anything else for a living, without having to get a day job. And Ellen and I were fortunate enough to be, a couple of those 50. She also sang opera and stuff like that, and I would direct and I would conduct and stuff like that. Um, but and then as the 90s went on, I got into things like No One Lives Forever and things like SWAT 2 and Championship Bass Fishing, some of the minor games that probably nobody's ever heard of, but a lot of games. And then around 99, 2000, something like that, we got auditions for Half-Life 2, and that was our first Valve game. And of course, Valve had no idea that we were married to each other, but they ended up hiring Ellen for the Overwatch, and they hired me for all the Citizens and Odessa Cubbage and a couple other guys. Um, and that was our first Valve game, and they evidently enjoyed working with us because when they put together Team Fortress 2, um, they actually asked for us to audition for some parts, and so they sent me the sniper and I think three other mercs. And they were thinking of me as the sniper, and they were thinking that he could probably have an Australian accent. And so, but they asked me to do other things. So I forget what kind of accents I gave him. He looked like an Aussie to me. So I concentrated on the Australian accent. Um, and landed that, and they hired Ellen for the administrator. And it wasn't until then they happened to book us on two consecutive sessions. Ellen went in first, and then I went in second down at this at Pure Audio, a recording studio that is no longer, but it was downtown Seattle. And Ellen went in and said, "Well, you're going to be working with my husband next." And they went, "Well, who's your husband?" And so that's the first time they found out that we were married to each other, and they thought that was hilarious. So when they put together uh, Left for Dead, there was a little scene at the end of Left 4 Dead where if you're wandering around and you make it to the water and you manage to kill all the zombies and all this kind of stuff, you hear a voice over the radio of a guy who has a houseboat that offers to come pick you up. And their original idea was to have Ellen and I bickering on the radio, where I'm calling out, "Hey, we have a houseboat. We can pick you up. We can give you a ride." And she's in the back going, "No, you nuts! There's zombies every place. What are you doing?" And so they hired us as this bickering married couple that I don't think made the cut. I think the only part of it that came through in the final game was me on the radio. But then they had her be the voice of the witch, so which she didn't even know. She did some screams and stuff on that gig, and they just, oh well, these screams will be good for this witch character. And so that's she found out that she was the voice of the witch in Left 4 Dead from fans who were, from like she didn't know
Wow.
that they'd used it. Because of course, once you record something for Valve, the recording belongs to them. They can use it for whatever they want. I mean, as long as it's in that game, they can't like spread it around. But so and then they hired her to play GLaDOS in Portal, and she became this megastar over that, and the song at the end and all that kind of stuff. So basically, that's I mean, that's what Ellen and I do. We're voice actors, we're theatrical actors. I'm still a composer. You can see my guitar in the background. I'm working on a project now. Um, and that's we're kind of performing artists, and I also wrote a novel, and I've script doctored a bunch of radio plays. I have a production company that produces 30-minute audio dramas that go out over the radio and on YouTube and stuff like that. So we try to keep busy.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like you've slowed down at all. It seems like there's always something new brewing, which is amazing. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
something big that I always
Enough
try.
work to keep you busy. Yeah.
Yes. Something big that I always try to remind people is that like creativity is this very important element in people's lives, and even people that are like, "Oh, I'm not a creative person," or "I don't know how to draw," or "I don't know how to play guitar." It's there's always some creative spark that's in you
Oh,
somewhere.
absolutely. Oh, and I see people working it out all kinds of ways, often in just the way they arrange their home. Uh, People will use their creativity to make their life a little bit nicer. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. What are some ways that like you're able to keep your creativity going, or always thinking, like there's a lot of people that might go, okay, I finished this really big project. What am I going to do next? Like, what's the next big thing? How do you go about that?
One of the most important things a friend of mine ever said to me, he was actually a counselor of mine, and was going through some stuff. But I brought up one time, I said, I'm not writing any music right now. And he said, maybe it's time to take a break. We, and a friend of mine, a writer, was saying, but I'm just going through this writer's block area. And I said, writer's block can only exist in a culture that says we should be doing something. And I think that's very important. I mean, we have this kind of Puritan work ethic thing that says, if we're not working, if we're not industrious, if we're not actively doing stuff all the time, the idle hands are the devil's playground, and we're going to end up being damned forever and stuff like that. And that's really not true. There's nothing wrong with taking a break. And um, I like to say they call it playing music, not working at music. They call it playing in a play. A play is a play. It's not a work. Um, and I would encourage people to indulge in their creativity whenever the mood strikes them. And if the mood doesn't strike them, go fishing, take a break. It's we have this, industrial mindset that it depresses me sometimes, because I look at some of the music. I mean, there's good music that comes out every year. There are always good artists, and you can always find really cool stuff, very interesting stuff, and engaging stuff. But it's it's all hanging on to this industry, which is like, if you're a journalist, they call it feeding the beast. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but if you worked at a newspaper, you needed to produce so many column inches. You just needed to put words in a row about something to fill up this page of the newspaper that had to come out every day. And the writers called it feeding the beast. They had to come up with something. Blah, 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 blah. And that just becomes a grind. That becomes a factory job, where you have to go and you have to do the same thing and stuff like that. And I have bounced away from that my entire life. I like to say I can do anything but hold a steady job, because I haven't. I've never had, I mean, voice acting gigs are like, maybe 2 or 3 hours long. And then you're fired. If you're let go, you're laid off. I remember back in 2008, there was this huge financial collapse, and all these people got laid off. And Ellen and I said, we get laid off 15, 20 times a year. What's the big deal? Um, but I think that our creative side, and if you go back, through cultures, back, just, look at tattoo art, skin art, cave art, basket weaving, pottery, all this kind of stuff. When you were weaving a basket or you're making a pot, all you needed it to do was hold something. But we didn't just do that. We made them a little bit fancy. We got, oh, I got two different colors of grass here. I can make a pattern. Oh, that looks cool. Oh, I killed a deer here. I'll remind myself that deer are around here, so I'll paint a picture of a deer on the wall. Um, and we'll gather around the campfire at night and tell stories to each other and sing songs and stuff like that. And it's just something that is so inherent in what we are that whatever your relate, one of my favorite photographs of all times, there was a flamenco guitarist named, his nickname was Manitas de Plata, and he was a gypsy, he lived in southern France, and there was this wonderful shot of him playing guitar, and there were a whole bunch of there's his whole community around him, and they were like right next to him, just sitting almost shoulder to shoulder. And he was just surrounded by people, and nobody was looking at him. He was playing, but they were all like doing their own thing. He belonged to them, he was theirs. That was just part of the community. And this is one of the best, greatest flamenco guitarists in the world at the time. And I just loved that picture of their community where he was no big deal at all. He was just one of the guys. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we think that some celebrity, an actor or a singer or a musician or whoever, is something magical or something special. I mean, we should feel like, they belong to us. They're a part of our community. They're one of us, and we are one of them. Um, so I would say the best way to interact with creativity is to not get in the way of it when it shows up and not demand more of it than it has to offer. We are creative when we're in the mood to be creative. And I think that if you want a job, if you want something where you have to show up every day and do it for 8 hours a day, well, get a job, demand a paycheck, and your creativity will be called upon, in the most, if you're a barista at a coffee shop, you can be creative. I mean, no matter what you're doing, if you mow lawns, you can be creative. There's always a way for you to engage your imagination and allow it to flower and produce something nice. I guess that's a very long answer to that question.
But it's a very well said answer. There's a lot of people also think it's like you need to focus on one specific thing. Like if you are a guitarist, that is your creative element. When really it's like maybe this is your one season of you're gonna focus on this. Once it's like okay, I feel like I'm done with that, you move on to maybe making videos or doing something different.
Right. I mean, if the idea is, I am only a successful human being if I become the most famous, successful actor, musician, scientist, doctor, whatever. And if I don't do that, then, I'm just a worthless mistake. Then almost everybody is a worthless mistake because we only have so much attention for famous people. We can only support about, a couple of dozen famous people at a time. I don't know that anyone can sit down and name more than 25 famous people without just running out of names. Um, and they might all have different groups of 25 famous people, but we just culture works when most people are boring. If we were all exciting all the time, we would freak out. We could not handle it, right? We like walking down the street and going, hey, to the guy who always goes, hey, back, and nothing much else. It just feels comfortable. I call it chirping. I love how birds, we have a couple of trees. Well, it's Seattle. We have lots of trees everywhere, but there's a group of trees right outside our window. And every day, from like March until October, the crows will come and land in this tree around sunset and have a gab session. And it'll just for about 45 minutes, and then they'll all fly away. They'll all depart in different directions. And I just love it that they all kind of check in. Say, hey, everybody okay? You still here? Hey, I don't see Megan. What happened to her? Oh, I think she got hit by a car. Or, I mean, they have to they have to check in with each other and talk to each other for a while. And they don't do anything much, But crows are creative. Crows will steal your keys and decorate their nests and all this kind of stuff. So we, I mean, I think it's fine that we're fascinated by a certain kind of work. And I mean, the kind of work that I do is, oddly enough, the kind of work that gets looked at by other people. People look at me while I'm working or listen to me while I'm working. A lot of people work and nobody pretty much pays attention to them unless they don't do their job, and then they get paid attention to. In my job, it's my job to get paid attention to. And so that means that it's much more likely for somebody to know my name and who I am than if I, say, worked as an aerospace engineer at Boeing. I might make a lot more money working as an aerospace engineer at Boeing, but nobody, I wouldn't be famous at all. I'd be known by my family, by my colleagues, and that would be it. Um, and so, I mean, I think it makes life fun to have these people, and particularly when we actually run into them, like if you meet somebody at a fan con, it's like, oh, this is a person you actually know. You really like their work and this and this and this, and you've been following along, and now you actually meet the person. And it's statistically unlikely for you to meet anybody. It's like 8 billion to 1 against that you will meet any particular person, right? And it's just noticeable when you already knew the work. I mean, it's just as unlikely for someone to meet you as it is for someone to meet me. It's just that it's more likely that they will already know what I do because of the nature of what I do. Um, so I'm not even sure what the question was, but I think what creativity and how to use it and stuff. I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah,
I think that it's important to me that everybody is just as valid as everybody else. That everybody has a unique path through the cosmos, a unique path through the cosmos. I I don't like the word special because, for one thing, if you parse the word special, it actually means a member of a species in the same way that typical means a member of a type. But we have connotated the word special to be kind of code for better. And we don't like saying that somebody's better, so we'll say that they're special. And it's like, well, to me, why bother being special when you're already unique? And each one of us is already unique. And the when you think about the astronomical odds against life arising in the universe at all, and then any particular being arising in the universe, any particular human being or bee or flower or anything else. I mean, it's a statistical miracle that any of us are here. And for us to spend any time at all thinking that we aren't what we should be or what we could be if we tried harder or something like that, we're already miracles. So, enjoy it.
just popping out quote after quote here with incredible work. Just, I'm an English major, and there's even sentences there that I'm like, oh, that was perfectly said. Yeah, I mean, exactly like you said, though, with a lot of people know you, they know your work. If they
Uh,
don't know you by name, they definitely know your voice
right, right.
in different games. And even like with me, if I were to walk into if you and I were to walk into a convention center, they would likely know you more and know your name.
Right. Right.
And
Just
but it
because
would
the
still
odd nature of my work. Right.
right, but it would still be one of those we're all there together and we're all there to experience or celebrate the same thing, which is
And this is
incredible.
what I mean, my first fan con when Ellen got famous and then I was her husband and people found out that we were married to each other and we both worked in all these Valve games and that was just kind of cool and weird.
Yeah.
But we started going to fan cons and I was just blown away. I was completely blown away walking through a con, and here is a spectacular woman with an amazing body cosplaying as like, Wonder Woman, say.
Yeah.
And standing right next to her is this really dumpy guy cosplaying as Wonder Woman. And they're just kind of chatting to each other and having a talk. And a lot more people are taking pictures of the spectacular looking woman, but it's like they're both just cosplaying and having a good time. And I thought, this is great. This is so egalitarian. And as we got into it more and more, we helped a friend of ours put together the first gay uh, a fan con specifically for the LGBTQ community. And that's when we started learning about online bullying and stuff like that that was going on in games. And I had no idea that that was going on. But so we were glad to help out with that. But and it does, and ultimately it doesn't surprise me, particularly when you have something that a lot of teenagers are doing. I remember being in junior high and high school, and bullying is just part of that phase of growing up. And I think that, it's always good to try to corral it and keep some rules and some boundaries and stuff like that. We don't want people getting hurt. Um, uh, but overall, when we could spend a weekend at a con where, there were 80,000 young people wandering around dressed as weirdos and not hear about one single fight, one single assault, and stuff like that. And that just everybody's just there to play and have a good time. And then when I really understood the depth of relationships that people form playing these games, and it wasn't until I started playing massively multiplayer
Oh, any
games.
MMO?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, that and started being on teams of players that went through various things, that I really realized, oh, there's a foxhole mentality here. I don't know if you've heard about that, but back in World War II, they had these things called foxholes. You dig a hole that, keep yourself out of the line of fire. And the people who were in the foxhole with you became, like, friends for life because you had each other's lives in your hands. And it's pretend, but you have, there are the players that don't come back for the weaker player to help them out, and then the players that do come back for the weaker player to help them out. And I tend to be the player that comes back and makes sure that everybody's okay. And so I formed a whole lot of really good relationships just online of people that I've never met. But then when we would go to fan cons and we would meet people who met each other, fell in love, got engaged without ever meeting or seeing what the other person looked like, and then met for the first time at a fan con where they were going to get married. I thought, that's cool. That's cool. When people are, and, I have friends that have friends from all over the world because they play games with them. I mean, literally all over the globe. And that to me is, I think we're going to find that that kind of stuff is going to help prevent war. It's not going to prevent war, but it's going to be very definitely a thing that goes in the right direction of, okay, well, we could invade this country, except I have a bunch of pals there that I play games with. If you think back, the beginning of World War One, everybody in France, nobody in France knew anybody in Germany. It was all just those people that spoke a different language and were weird and stuff like that. So that made me very happy and made me very optimistic, and particularly, and of course, Ellen and I had heard is a whole bunch of old people worrying and complaining about young people hiding in their basements playing games all the time. And, the cliche, well, when I was a kid, all we had was a stick and a rock and we made our own games, stuff like that. And when we went to fan cons, we realized that these young people that are playing video games, they have a stick in a rock too, but it's like open source code, and they're creating whole new levels of games, or they're, drawing things. I mean, just incredible creativity everywhere we saw. And we've been given by fans so much just fabulous artwork. And so I realized, no, that's just the worry that because kids are now have very sophisticated toys, very sophisticated games, as opposed to, like, say, chess or checkers or something like that, that somehow they don't need to be creative. There is not Creativity doesn't have a need. Creativity is just something that's in us, and we can't stop it. You know, um, we have stuff to say, and we think we have a better way to say it than the next person, so we say it, and or we paint it, or we draw it, or we write it, or whatever. So it just fan cons to me were just really, really fun, and made me very optimistic about the future.
That's nice. Yeah, and going back to a point you said earlier about with like gaming and that whole kind of atmosphere. I remember like when I was growing up in like the early 2000s, it was a lot of gaming was seen as like a nerdy thing or something
Right,
that, like you
right.
mentioned, a person in their mother's basement, Cheeto puff on their fingers. Um, But
But of
now
course,
it's
it didn't start with computer games. I mean,
oh yeah,
if you were in chess club in the 60s, you were a nerd,
you were a
you
geek,
were,
yeah.
but if you were into football, then you were a jock, it was a different kind of game. So, but anyway, okay, but
Yes.
didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. What was your point?
No, you're fine. The only difference is now we're in basements for some reason. I don't know why we've gone below ground. um,
Oh, I know. No, go out to Valve. Everybody is away from the windows in kind of darkened areas because you
really?
want to be able to see the computer screen with no glare. That's the thing. That's why you need to be in a
Oh,
darkened space. All the people who are making these games are working in darkened spaces where they can see what the computer screen looks like.
not my kind of environment. I am right next to a window. Perfect
Right.
here.
Well,
But
of course, if you're a writer or something like that, then yes, you can work anywhere you want to. But if you're actually working on graphics and stuff like that, you're in a place that's just a little bit dark, so that there's no glare.
yeah, and that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
But but yeah, now we're seeing a lot of people where in today's world gaming is seen as a bit more positive. I'm not going to say the best, but in the sense of you hear about, like you were mentioning, a lot of community stories of people meeting for the first time or people traveling around the world just to see their online friend,
Mhm.
which would be unheard of back in the 90s.
Right, right. As recently as like 2000, not in reality at all. Yeah. And of course, I mean, I think it's important to remember that there have always been people who hated football. There have always been people who hate, well, why is our city spending all this money for a stadium when, and it's like, okay, take it easy. People have a good time. Um, but there will always be people who don't understand why somebody does something that they don't want to do.
Do you think that has to do with a certain jealousy or lack of understanding towards it?
Well, I mean, we're diving deep here, but there, all have you ever heard of a phrase exogamic relief?
I have not.
So you've heard of the term monogamy, right? And polygamy and stuff like that.
Yes.
Has to do with, monogamy means you get married to just one person. Polygamy means you get married to a lot of people. Exogamic relief means that it's better if you marry somebody from some other tribe than if you marry somebody in your own tribe. And it's something that somehow our DNA told us. It's like you don't want to be combining the same genes over and over and over again. And so early on, we developed this story of the tall, dark stranger riding into town. That, if somebody comes in from outside, all of a sudden, all of our attention goes to him. Part of the attention is, who the heck are you? Are you here to rob us? Are you here to kill us? Are you the enemy? But all the people who are interested in getting together and making babies, they're going, ooh, new kid from not here, right? And we're just it's very, very much in our hard wiring thing to look for people from elsewhere. But that means there needs to be people from elsewhere, which means that we developed in this, early tribal culture, hunter-gatherer culture. We would get into little groups, and if the group got big enough, a group would split off and go someplace else. And they wouldn't be that far away. We could still be in communication, but we'd get into fights with each other, we get into arguments with each other, and we date each other. And so we have this thing called xenophobia, fear of the alien, fear of the outsider. And it's a reasonable fear. It's not an unreasoned fear. We know everybody in the tribe. We know everybody in the neighborhood. And if there are some people that are annoying and maybe are thieves, we know them too. And we know they're annoying and we know they've stolen something. And everybody has reputations and all this kind of stuff. But somebody from somewhere else, we don't know. We don't know what their intentions are. And to this day, if somebody does something differently than the way we do it, if they dress differently, they eat different foods, if they smell different because they eat more garlic than I do or something like that, if they have a different accent or speak in a different language, it's like, what the heck? What are you saying? Well, I can't understand you. Are you laughing at me? Are you insulting me? I don't know how to interact with this. And I think that that is part of when we see a group of people doing something, that group now becomes a new tribe. And if we're not doing that thing, we're not in the tribe, which means that tribe is the other tribe. And there is a certain element of danger there because it's just unknown. What do they get up to in those places? I mean, I remember when I was a hippie back in the 60s, and people had all kinds of ideas about what hippies did. Um, but just because we were different, beatniks were different. It's like if you're different, then we all get upset. Um, and getting upset is another way of saying getting excited. And that's why I say we can only take so many famous people because we can't get too excited. We burn ourselves out. We like being bored. We really do. Every once in a while, we want to be excited, but most of the time, we just want to sit around, picking our nose or whatever. So I think that that is, whenever you see that, whenever you see, oh, LGBTQ community, foreign, weird, I don't know any LGBTQ people. I have no idea what they do. Do they burn goats to Satan? I have no idea. But my imagination can fill in all kinds of the most horrible things, right? And then if I get to know some people, it's like, oh, okay, well, now they're part of my tribe and I'm not worried about them anymore. Um,
It's amazing
so,
that
and I think that in this modern world, one of the things that we're dealing with a lot is the fact that there are so many of us now. I remember just back in the 90s when I was still climbing mountains with my buddy Andy, we would do some backcountry stuff in the States, and there were enough people in the backcountry that they were kind of a drag. It's like you were hoping to get out there and be by yourself. And then we went up and did some backcountry stuff up in Canada. And people were so scarce that if you met somebody in the backcountry, it was like, oh, thank God, another person. We feel safer now. If one of us breaks a leg, then we can have enough people to carry him out or something like that. And so it was very interesting to me how we kind of have an optimum density of people to be comfortable with, and we passed that about, oh, I'd say 1850. There started just being too many people for us to just be able to be comfortable. We're on alert all the time. I talk about the backcountry. Friends of mine say, "Well, how can you go out there? What if you run into a bear?" And I always say, "Buddy, you are constantly surrounded by literally tens of thousands of large, unpredictable, omnivorous mammals." And the nice thing about bears is they're never drunk and they don't carry weapons. So,
the day that starts happening, then we can worry.
right, exactly. But to your point of why do people look at people doing something else and go, what's wrong with those people? That's it. It's like it's tribalism. It's are they in my tribe or are they if they're not in my tribe, are they the enemy?
It's incredible that we live in a world where it's you need to be different, you need to be unique, you need to be creatively endeavored, and at the same time, you need don't be too different. Follow our rules.
Well, of course, this is the thing. The only reason that you and I are here is that our ancestors managed to make themselves noticeable to someone. They managed to find a way to stand out so that somebody could say, ooh, I like you. Let's go make babies, right? I mean, that's how we reproduce is by being noticeable, by being attractive, right? By doing something. Um, and and once again, I like to say that sexuality is actually so annoying that nature had to invent the orgasm just to get us to do it.
I mean, yeah.
The idea of getting two large, dangerous animals close enough that they can exchange genetic material. We invented dancing. And when you think about it, what is dancing? Dancing is a systematic way to get physically close to other human beings. It's like there are so many rules that we're that close, but we're all doing the same step. We're all moving our hands and feet in the same way. And that way we can get close enough to smell each other's pheromones and decide whether or not we want to make babies. I mean, it's all about how do we are all dangerous and unpredictable, psychotic weirdos. How do we feel safe enough to get close enough so that we can actually be intimate and produce more human beings? And this tension is, I mean, I think about this a lot because this is the basis of all art forever. Is ultimately everything is a love story. Everything is, how do we get together? How do we even, solving the quest is being the hero. Why do you want to be the hero? So that so that somebody notices you and wants to be around you. Um, so but that's the thing. We're constantly trying to be noticed, and we don't like when other people are being noticed because that means maybe they'll get the best mates and we'll get shut out in the cold. And so there's all this competition and all this kind of stuff. But really, all we're trying to do is make more people.
Yeah. Which I was like, okay, I'm gonna start putting myself out there. The year was 2020, and then I'm like, I'm gonna go dancing, and then COVID happened.
Right, 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 right. I know,
So
I
I'm like,
know.
what am I gonna do now?
Yeah, yeah.
So
Oh man. I mean, we were so fortunate. We had already passed the age of retirement when COVID hit. So we were already on our pensions. We were already on Social Security. But we had all of these friends who were making their living as performers, and all of the performers venues just shut down. Everybody we knew had to figure out something else to do to make a living. And fortunately, our friends who did voice acting could keep working because you do that, in your own studio at home and stuff like that. But everybody who was like, all my musician friends, all my theater actor friends, just employment went away. There was no employment. And they got very creative and figured out all kinds of ways to do it online and Zoom performances and stuff like that. But we really felt for our younger friends, because it was just a gut punch to everybody.
and that goes back to what we were saying. Everyone's creative in some way, even when it's
Right.
like you don't think it. It's you were problem solving. You had to figure out what to do next. Um,
Well, true. And this is why when something bad happens like that, like COVID or a storm or anything like that, all of a sudden our creativity just comes to the fore, and we say, okay, how do we rebuild this guy's house? We don't have the money, but can we borrow this? Can we call this person? What kind? We get really creative right away when a problem hits.
Now, I've just realized how long we've been talking about creativity, and I love that. Like, I could talk about creativity all day, but I have a job to do as well. um, but yeah, so I guess I'm trying to think of a good segue here. So, dancing on over to Valve
Okay.
with their game of Team Fortress 2, and we did touch base on it a little bit with the conventions and fan base. Now, a big thing that I've been realizing is I've never played Team Fortress 2. It was actually a dear friend of mine, David, who has been for years recommending me to try it.
Uh-huh.
We set up this interview, and I'm like, all right, I'll give it a try. um, and I'm playing it, and I'm talking to a lot of the different players there, going like, oh, how long have you been playing it? And some have been playing for years upon years, like decades at this point.
Mhm.
Um, as someone who's been involved in the community and has worked with the fans and have been to conventions, have been around, what do you think, whether it's Team Fortress 2 or any game for that matter, what do you think keeps a fan base alive for this long?
Well, for one thing, I mean, the Team Fortress 2 is truly a game as opposed to a story. And in a story game, you play through and you solve the problems to get through the story and complete the quest, and then you've done it. You can go back and do it again, but you know how it works out now. You've solved the problems once. In a game like chess or Go or Team Fortress 2, it's just a game. You know what the problem, in Team Fortress 2, you're trying to get the truck to the other end of to base. It's basically capture the flag. I don't know if you remember that game, but that's something that we used to play when I was a kid. Um, and and so, I mean, I know. I mean, the gameplay is well. I mean, the guys who designed the gameplay really did their jobs well. I'm voicing a new game for Valve called Deadlock, and once again, the gameplay is very very well done. But the other thing that I just have to give credit to Valve for is the writing. I mean, the writers at Valve are maniacs. They are insane. And I mean, when you put together a game of mercs, of mercenaries, these badass murderer people who kill people for a living, and their next idea is, let's put them in a conga line, or let's have the sniper all of a sudden have an owl head. I mean, this is just wackadoodle stuff, right? And the kind of hats that you can, I mean, it's just weird, stupid, silly, zany stuff. And it's so unexpected. And the level of writing that went into Portal that made it so hilarious. I mean, that's what yeah, a lot of people talk about a particular scene in the movie Jaws about the shark, and they're in the boat, they're down in the cabin of the boat, and the old fisherman guy is telling them this story, and it gets to a point where the story causes the audience, the movie audience, to laugh. Something funny happens, and right then the shark punches a hole in the side of the boat, and it goes from a laugh to a scream because laughing opens up your emo. You things are friendly. I'm laughing. Everything is safe. So that then when something happens, it has much more impact on you. And so when you're out there and you're laughing at each other and getting killed by each other, that you're constantly in that heightened level of engagement and vulnerability that allows you to enjoy the interaction that much more. And I think I mean, I love working at Valve precisely for that, precisely for the writing, the kinds of things that I'm called upon to do as an actor to make this level of writing come to life is great fun because every actor I know of has worked on a project that they're just trying to polish up to make serviceable. And then sometimes you get to go, oh, this language is so fabulous. I just hope I can invest enough to live up to the language. And that's the great thing about working on Valve games is you're always going out there and it's always going to be something engaging and creative and cool.
Yeah. And I think that some of the best compliments you can give a creative person is calling their work insane and then following through with it.
I
It's
have no higher compliment.
yes. Yeah, it's wonderful to see just how invested the community is. The more I've looked into it is because I haven't seen a fan base similar to Team Fortress 2 or really Valve as a whole anywhere else because you have, of course, fan art or fan stories that people will write or draw, and it's incredible always. But then you have people making spin-off games or videos of like
Uh-huh.
skits based
Right.
on the character, and it's incredible to see.
Well, this was something that Valve decided to do. I mean, they decided to open their source code so that people could
Yeah.
go in and design new levels for Portal, new areas for Team Fortress 2. I've seen, where people put a portal gun in Half-Life and a portal gun in Team Fortress 2, and you can just go around and play and do that. They decided to do that. They decided to open up their source code. Um, I mean, Valve is a very interesting company. It's a level company. There is no boss. Anybody can go into anybody's office and say, "Hey, I have this idea," um, and uh, and it's not publicly traded, so they don't have to. They don't have a board of directors. They don't have to please their stockholders or anything like that. And so, yeah, I mean, people have a very love-hate relationship with Valve because Valve does whatever they want to, which means they do these amazing wackadoodle, out to lunch, left field things that are so entertaining. But then they never make Team Fortress 3. They never make a Half-Life 3. They never make a Portal 3. They do whatever they want. And so, I mean, on the one hand, yes, people have been playing Team Fortress 2 for a long time because there's never been a Team Fortress 3.
Yeah.
You know, but also along with that, and of course, and there has been some consternation in the fan base over the last several years that the code for the game is so old now that it's vulnerable, that bots can get in and mess up the play for everybody else. And once again, Valve was like, the folks at Valve do whatever they want. And if nobody's like interested in maintaining Team Fortress 2, it kind of like gets put on the back burner. And they finally got it together to get, but to really go in and completely rewrite it from the ground up using brand new code that would make it more secure and stuff. I mean, that's just something that they'll have to decide to do at some point. But I think that, it certainly says a lot for the game that people will even put up with all these bots just so that they can get in there with their friends and keep playing it. Because I think it's all about friendship. I mean, the mercs and their relationships with each other are very much like playground relationships. And I think it encourages people to hang with people. And if you're not just shooting somebody, but shooting them and then insulting them, then that's a special thing. So
Yeah. It's yeah, and that was something that was interesting during my first match playing. I guess I was that obvious that I was just running around. I had no idea what was happening.
you were a new guy, right,
New
right,
I
right.
was a noob, and people were running around until somebody from the other team started writing to me, just going like, "Hey, just so you know, here's kind of the layout. Here's some help, just to like walk me through how to play." Unheard of in any other game that I've ever played.
Well,
That they would help me. And at first, I'll be honest, at first I was like, don't, I've played games before. I know what I'm doing. And I'm like, oh, wait, there is a secret tunnel. So,
right, 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 right.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, because ultimately, in a game like Team Fortress 2, when the game is the most fun is when you have the best competitors, right? When you have people at your level giving you problems to solve, stuff like that. So there is a real impetus to bring people up to speed so that, because, it's not that much fun just, bam, okay, bam, like shot you, I shot you, I shot you, I shot you. This is not challenging anymore. Um, but I think that there's just something about the writing and the nature of the gameplay that encourages that kind of interaction. And I think it engenders a lot of loyalty in the fan base. They just love it. They love going there.
And hopefully we can get, another game in the future that'll do the same. But who knows?
Although
Probably not
and
Team
chess
Fortress 3
chess has lasted centuries. I hope that
or
Team
chess.
Fortress 2 lasts centuries. So.
Be great.
So
Now,
I have about 5 more minutes. So I don't know if you want to have any kind of summation thing going or something like that.
yeah, pretty much it was just about Team Fortress. Big thing, I guess, just to kind of wrap everything up, is that there's a lot of creative people out there.
Mhm.
Um, is there a good starting place that you think, like, if you could give advice to somebody who's interested into getting into this kind of industry, what would you say to them?
Right. Okay. So the relationship between arts and industry has always been an odd one. Um, Stravinsky used to say, or once famously said, the trick is to get commissioned to write the piece you wanted to write anyway. Um, we There is a part of us that as a creative person, as an artist, there's a part of us that wants to be transparent and clear to the universe and let the universe flow through us and just tell the truth as closely as we can perceive it. That may or may not be marketable, right? All of the truth tellers throughout history have never made any money at it. They told the truth and it was great for humanity, but they didn't get rich. Um, but we can put ourselves out there and see if people want to experience what we have to offer. If, if a singer, we can get together with a band and, try to get a gig at a bar and play music for people. If we're an actor, that's a little bit trickier because you have to be in a place where there is at least one theater or one studio that produces something or something like that. So, whereas, if you're a musician, you can be in a lot of places, still kind of towards big cities. I mean, the thing about performing arts and arts in general is you need a whole bunch of people with enough spare change to buy a ticket. That's what, we're not necessary, we're a luxury. So you have to be around people who have disposable income. Um, but then it really becomes, if you're an artist, if you're a poet, if you're a writer, if you're a coder, if you're a game designer, anything like this, it's how do I get my work seen? Um, and the wonderful thing about the internet and the bad thing about the internet is that everybody can get their work seen. So it's on the one hand, you don't need, I mean, back in my day, if my band, the Keith Lowry Duet, we had to get distribution for our album, or our album wasn't going anywhere. It was a physical thing that you had to put in a truck and drive across the country, and it all cost money. And so you had to have somebody, there's all kinds of things that had to happen in order. Now it's weightless. I can put my music on DistroKid, on whatever, and this or that music app, and that's it. People can buy it. And I don't have to pay a truck driver. I don't have to buy gas. I don't have to buy a cardboard box to put the albums in. Nothing. Um, so that's a wonderful thing. On the other hand, it means that everybody, all 8 billion of us, can do that. We don't need to invest any money to do that. We can just create a piece of art, put it online, and see what happens. Um, Never stop learning your craft. Never be shy about observing people who are better than you at it. You can always pick up things from just watching the work of others. Um, and don't be shy about putting yourself out there. You may think that your work is not ready for public consumption yet. Let the public decide. If you go to an agent and the agent says, take some acting lessons and come back. Great, that's good feedback. Go take some acting lessons, come back. Be ready for rejection, because most people aren't going to understand your art, aren't going to understand your writing, your paintings, your acting, your music. They're not going to get it. And you need to find the people who do. That you need to find your market. So don't be shy, and don't worry about rejection. That's just part of the game. I probably, in my life, I would say I probably landed 10% of the auditions I did, maybe that many. Um, so that's much worse than a baseball batting average. You know, if you're batting 100 as an actor, if you know enough people, then you're working all the time. So yeah, just audition, audition, audition. Uh, if you're serious about acting, get to put together a resume, and don't lie on it. Just tell what you've done, particularly if you're just starting out. Uh, Nobody expects it to be a big, long resume if you're 18 years old. And get a professional to take your headshot so that you look like you care about what you're doing. And you can Google talent agents and email them and say, hey, this is my, and these days, the best way to do it is to set up your own web page so that you can go to a talent agency and say, hey, here's the link to my web page. You can click on it and see what I do. My resume is there, my headshot's there. And that way the agent doesn't have to open any attachments on the email, which they probably won't ever do.
Right.
I think, but that's pretty much it. Audition, audition, audition. That's how you make it as a performer.
Yeah. And if anything, I mean, silly as it sounds, my idea started as, oh, I want to talk about games, to now on my channel, I'm a little cartoon fellow with no arms. uh, just
Right.
talking about whatever pops in my mind.
Right,
Um,
right, right. You put together something and you're putting it out there, and that's a great way to do it. The people
start.
who designed the game that became Portal were students, and they put together a project, and Gabe Newell saw the project and hired them, and they worked at Valve for a while. So,
They started someplace.
right, right.
Now, well, thank you so much for your time and coming on to talk about your story and everything. I do want to ask like one thing, like following the interview, like at the end, for
Okay,
so
sure.
the audience doesn't see. But uh, you know, just at the end, where can people find you if they're interested in seeing more of your work, or this is kind of like
Right.
the
Okay.
shout
So,
out section for
uh,
you.
yeah, I'm very excited. I'm in a movie that just was a hit at Sundance called Train Dreams. It hasn't been released broadly yet, but Netflix picked it up, and there's been a lot of talk about it. I mean, it was great fun working on it. I'm just a small part in it, but people are saying really wonderful things about it. So the movie is Train Dreams. If you want to follow me, I'm on Twitter. I'm on YouTube. John Lowrie on YouTube. You can see all the Search for Sandwich videos and the Sandwich Blues and all that kind of stuff on YouTube. You can find my novel, Dancing with Eternity. It's an audiobook read by me and Ellen, produced by my audio drama company, so it's full music and sound effects, stuff like that. That's on Amazon and other places. I also have a Facebook page that if any young people still use Facebook, they can find me there. I'm on Instagram, but I'm not really on it. I mean, so there's not much there. But I'd say Twitter and YouTube and Facebook. So it's John Patrick Lowrie on Facebook, John Patrick Lauer on Twitter, and then just John Lowrie on YouTube.
Oh, thank you so much for your time, and that's going to be the end of the interview. So now we can all relax for a second. Now we can get back to seriousness.